Those in the audience who wish to speak on a non-agenda item, please fill a card now and submit it. Thank you, John. Are we on? Council audio on? Okay, thank you for tuning in. Those listening, council audio. I'm Councilmember Joe Buscaino, Chair of Public Works and Reduction Committee. I'm joined here by my colleagues, Councilwoman Martinez and Council Members Ryu and O'Farrell. Today is Monday, the 26th of September. Meeting here at the John Farrell Council Chambers. The Public Works Commission is running late, therefore we are here. If I can turn to your attention to the agenda, apparently we have, let's see, we have cards on every item. From, let's see here, Mr. B, whoever that is, please come forward. We will do 3 minutes of all your items and then take another minute of general public comment. Mr. Spindler, please come forward.
All right, good. So today, the big day of thievery. We got Luz Rivas trying to get on the Board of Public Works. They're voting on a gigantic issue today. She has every right in the world to be seated and consider that effort, and that is the exclusive trash contracts. And yet, at the same time as we're here just working on her confirmation, they're going to take the vote today. Now, is that transparent? No. Is that even reasonable? No. Why aren't we waiting for her to be seated in her new job and allow her to look at this contract and decide what she wants to do? We don't know what her position on this is going to be. She doesn't know. So why are we waiting in the other room right now and ramming this contract through with 4 commissioners when we can just wait a little bit and get this 5th commissioner seated so we have a full quorum? Doesn't that make sense, David Rue? Doesn't that make sense that everybody that ran for transparency? But nobody cares. Nobody cares, and that's the problem, and that's why, see, Commissioner to be Rivas, you're just going to get paid this money, $140,000 a year to be a puppet. And normally I come here with a little tiny pig and a little puppet, and I didn't have a chance to bring my puppet, but I will later. And you'll see the puppetry going on here in this city. It's really a shame that somebody goes to all this work to get...
Stick to the item, please.
To get to this work so that we can live in a city that just says screw democracy and screw transparency.
Stick to the items, please.
And that's why that's what we have. Now, the rest of all of this is really just basically pro forma bullshit. That's really all it is. I mean, all this stuff is just spending money on crap that nobody knows what the fuck it's for. The 6th Street Viaduct, for example, we're replacing a bridge. I don't know why we're spending more, because they just got to have more money. Gilmore Street, temporary closing in Victory and Gilmore, that's a pain in the ass in CD3. And then we got another one in CD3, sidewalks, Van Owen Street. And that's kind of an interesting project when you go out to Blumenfield's district and look at all of that shit they're building, because they're building this fancy little bridge over the LA River. And they did that in Canoga Park, too, some time ago. And they just keep redoing it. They tear it up and they rebuild it. Tear it up and rebuild it. And then we got...
General public comment? General public comment.
Yeah, see. So, again, it's good that the new commissioner is going to be able to see this puppet show in action. Now, the city obviously doesn't give a fuck about its people or its small businesses. They're carving up the whole city into these little mafia zones for exclusive trash contracts, one of them based out of Arizona. One of these companies is based out of Arizona. Isn't that the racist state? I thought Nuri wasn't going to do business with Arizona after all that illegal alien stuff. But you see, nobody fucking cares about that because they haven't mentioned that in the LA Times, have they? We're giving an Arizona company, one of our major trash companies, contracts in the other room, and little Nuri's going to sit here and go, "Ruh, ruh, ruh, I'm a puppy. Ruh, 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 I have my own grand jury, yes. Ruh."
Okay, we will now hear, we have a card on number 3, Leah Renee. Please come forward. On item number 3. Good afternoon, welcome.
Good afternoon. Am I doing all 3 of them together?
No, we'll take item number 3.
Okay, which one's number 3?
Ma'am, you filled out the card, ma'am.
I know, there were 3 cards. Can you just remind me which, is that the sewers, right?
Yes, the report on the sanitation contract.
Okay, so I am bringing an issue to you with the sewers and the sanitation. I'd like to put it into the public record. There is a problem in CD11 with the failure to upgrade, mitigate, and fix the problems with the sanitary sewers. And it is causing extraordinary harm to the Palisades coastal bluffs, which could then fall down and hurt the people on Pacific Coast Highway. It actually looks like it's planned because nobody's putting bypass sewers into all the broken pipes. And I brought that to the attention with a video in June to show how badly the pipes were broken. And I have found other pipes that were broken, and the city employees are saying it's not leaking, but you can clearly see that it is leaking.
Thank you, ma'am.
Could I?
If I can now bring up Ms. Ramirez, Antonio Ramirez, on item number 5. Reset our clock, please.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this motion is by Blumenfield and Englander. This is a very important motion. This is involving the closing of Victory Boulevard, which used to be nice about 30 years ago. It is run down and dilapidated and an eyesore, definitely. I would hope that that when Englander conducts this forum, that he will allow all the adjacent property owners to speak freely, uninhibited, unencumbered, not censored, not interrupted, or thrown out. I would hope that he would at least allow them 3 minutes, because it takes 1 minute.
Stick to the item, Antonia. You know.
Well, again, it says solicit input from the adjacent property owners. We are hoping that Mitchell Englander will have the balls and the decency to allow these people to speak freely and share their opinions within 3 minutes. You can't possibly do it in 1 minute. It's virtually impossible. You're wasting time when you do that. So,
thank you. With that, colleagues, unless you want to pull any of these items, we can approve these items on consent. Items 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, we got a motion, Mr. O'Farrell, seconded by Ms. Martinez. So without objection, we'll approve items 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on consent. Thank you. Okay, item number 1, please.
Item 1, communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Ms. Luz Rivas to the Board of Public Works for the term ending June 30, 2019.
Thank you, sir. I have 2 cards on this item before us. Leah Renee, please come forward. Okay, she's no longer with us, and she looks like she left the room. Antonio Ramirez, item number 1. Please, I remind you to stick to the item.
Thank you very much. We need to say the unsayable. Again, is Miss Luz Rivas a wetback? And is she a gangbanger? And why does Mayor always choose these Latinas that, I don't know, I don't understand. It's all Latinos and Latinas. What is it? Does he have some kind of a kind of a mordida underneath the table or some sort? I don't understand. But what I want to know is, can Miss Luz Rivas, can she be objective? Does she have gang ties? Is she gang affiliated? Can she do her job ethically, with integrity, with dignity, with no ties to any gangs? That's what I want to know. I want to see that woman stand up and say, I will be objective, gang or no gang. I will be objective, fair, dignified, and decent, and make an objective choice. I want her to work for the people, by the people, to the people, and everybody else. I want her to stand up and do the right thing, clean up LA and the infrastructure.
Thank you. Ms. Luz Rivas, please come to the table. I'm really excited about this appointment. I hope you still want to do this after hearing these
Mr.
comments.
President, if I can just ask,
Yes.
Ms. Ramirez, by the way, Ms. Rivas is a MIT and Harvard graduate. She's an MIT and Harvard graduate, just for your information.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. I believe what we have before us, colleagues, maybe you might want to explain what MIT is for Ms. Ramirez. Thank you so much. It's, I believe, what we have before us, colleagues, is a great suggestion recommendation by our mayor. I think in a first time in a long time, we have someone with the skill set who is an engineer that will sit on the Public Works Commission. I had a thorough meeting with Ms. Rivas. I was impressed by her resume, her love for service, her love for the city, and I asked that you share a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you plan on bringing to the Board of Public Works.
Sure. Thank you so much. I am an engineer by training. I was an electrical engineer for years, and since then have transitioned into STEM education, where I've worked at places like Caltech. I taught at USC in the Viterbi School of Engineering, and 5 years ago I founded a nonprofit that serves young girls to get them interested and excited about science and engineering. A lot of my background has been working to increase diversity and access to places where women and underrepresented minorities have not normally been well represented, especially like in science and technology fields. So I hope to bring that to the city in this role. I'm also excited about the engineering that's going on in the city. I think this is an exciting time for Los Angeles, and I definitely hope to contribute in that way to the Board of Public Works.
It's quite an awesome responsibility, and I know you're going to fulfill your responsibility with love and passion, and you bring the skills and knowledge, the abilities to serve on this commission. I strongly feel, and in a time where we're looking at the next item, wanting to fix our failed streets. We have the largest street network in this country. A time where we're fixing our infrastructure with our streets and sidewalks and doing everything we can to address the tree issues in the city of Los Angeles, just to name a few of what you're going to be taking on. So really appreciate you taking on this role and agreeing to serve. I do want to turn over to Ms. Martinez, who I know you both go way back. And if you'd like to have some words, Ms. Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. President, and congratulations, Luz. So, members, me and Ms. Rivas go back to high school. We actually graduated the same year, and I'm proud to say she was one of the smartest women in school when I was there. Her love for science and math was evident by being accepted to MIT, and later she got a graduate degree from Harvard. She grew up in Pacoima, like myself, and often we don't hear the stories of women like Luz coming out of our neighborhoods. That's usually not what the media portrays, unfortunately, but there's wonderful role models like Luz who go off to do wonderful things and don't forget where they came from. Lately, we've been working on her nonprofit that services a lot of the schools in my district. Do It Yourself Girls is a nonprofit that she founded and started a couple of years ago, which focuses on 4th and 5th grade girls in some of the most poorest areas in my district, and it incentivizes them to fall in love with math and science so that they can grow up and look up to Luz and become engineers and scientists and astronauts. And so I often say we can't be what we cannot see, and Luz is a reflection of that. She's an incredibly accomplished engineer, and I'm very proud to call her a friend and someone that so many of us look up to. And I'm just very honored that she accepted the challenge. I know it's a lot of work, but she's going to make us very, very proud.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you,
Mr. Rue?
thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add to the comment. I had a fortunate opportunity to meet her, and I think she is overqualified for the position, not just when it comes to her education or technical background, but also her willingness and her past experience in community. So, I mean, I think she is more than well suited for this position, and she also brings diversity in. Her ethnic diversity as a woman, and everything that she is. I think it's a perfect fit, more than a perfect fit, and I'm very excited to be working with her. And I thank you for your commitment to service, and thank you for your willingness to serve.
Thank you. Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a chance to sit down with Ms. Rivas on Friday, and I'm very impressed and excited about having an engineer on the Board of Public Works. And in my district, I've worked so diligently with women in some of the STEM schools to get more young women interested in a career in engineering and defy expectations that are gender specific. And so I'm excited about you bringing your talent to the board, but also I think that awareness and that extra, I think, sort of lift that you'll give to young women across the city and set an example that you don't have to just go to traditional gender-specific expected careers. And so I look forward to you exercising that experience and that sort of point of view on the Board of Public Works. So I'm very excited to see you as part of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So from what I hear, it seems like we have the full support of this committee, and without objection, we will approve this nomination of Luz Rivas as our next Board of Public Works Commission. So congratulations, and we'll see you in council.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
John, when we will see Ms. Rivas in council?
Council on Wednesday.
Wednesday, thank you. Fantastic. Okay, so moving on to item number 2, our final item. We have some speaker cards here. I'll call them up first. Hillary Norton, followed by Jessica Meany, Leah Renee, and Antonio Ramirez. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to speak in front of you, and as the mother of a Latina engineer, I am very proud that Ms. Rivas has been appointed. She is a high school freshman, and I know sees Ms. Rivas as one of her many heroes. So, I wanted to speak today about the use of funds and local return for street repaving. We had the pleasure at FAST, I'm the executive director of FAST, Fixing Angelenos Stuck in Traffic, to be working on how we use our funds better for the things that are going to cost us the most. And it's very clear through the work of Councilmember Buscaino and Councilmember Englander that time is not our friend. But there are things that we think are important as we look at where we could leverage other funds. We believe that local return should be used, but we also want to look at how we can use state and federal funding to solve this problem as well. We think sidewalks are a key issue, and we want to keep working with you to make sure that we address the most serious problem. We have the highest costs in the nation for what happens to our vehicles based on poor streets. We'd like to see prioritization on the vehicle-enhanced network, the transit-enhanced network, and the high-injury network, so that the repairs that can be made are the ones that are going to be enduring the most issues with the most use. This is a very forward-looking plan. We want to support you as we support the use of local return money, and we just thank you for your forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Hillary. Jessica?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. My name is Jessica Meany, the Executive Director of Investing in Place. We submitted a letter. I brought some copies for council file on this item Really excited about the potential $56 million we'll see from Measure M and local return when it passes in November. Just want to urge a little bit of caution and learning from some of the excellent planning work we've done in the city on the mobility plan that encourages us to allocate at least 20% to walking and biking, to prioritize vehicle-enhanced networks, and to really focus on where we're going. I certainly support fixing our potholes, but my question is, which ones and what priority, and are we making sure that this works for sidewalks, bus stops, and potholes as well? This is one of our best, most easy-to-spend transportation dollars, ensuring that we use this money to leverage state and federal funds to grow the pie. That's my recommendation. So excited to work with you as we continue this conversation.
Thank you for joining us. Leah, Renee? We are now joined by Councilmember Curran Price. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Hi, honorable council members. I'd like to bring to your attention a map. It's City of Los Angeles map 848, and it is the coastal zone boundary map for the dual permit jurisdiction, and it has a limit of construction for streets on the face of a coastal bluff. Right now, you're dumping your sewers into the underground, and it's running underneath these streets, and the streets are cracking, they're alligatoring, there's bulges, there's the appearance that it's going to, the street posts are moving, and your staff is saying it doesn't exist. It's somewhere weird twilight zone like Alice in Wonderland, where they say there's no water, but you can watch the water coming out of the curbs. It appears that it's going to be the next Palos Verdes Estates, where San Pedro, where the White's Point, is that what it's called? Where the city was too late, they didn't fix it in time, and then they tried to fix it, and then it fell down the hill anyway. Please don't let the Pacific Palisades Bluffs fall down after the fact. You have the time right now to fix it. Please fix your streets and your sewers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our final speaker on the side of Antonio Ramirez, please come forward.
Thank you. First, before you do your capital improvement program, start by providing bathrooms, showers, laundry, and storage for homeless women out on the streets in the downtown area, not in Skid Row. Then you can start the reconstruction and rehabilitation. Now, I infer rehabilitation to mean sanitize, bleach, disinfect, and clean the stench, the urine stench and the feces and all the crap and the debris and the trash that is all over the downtown area, and start removing this upholstery that's full of scabies.
Speak on the item, Antonia, please.
But that's exactly what I mean. The dishonorable Mayor Garcetti and council members have not done anything from inside to outside to sanitize, disinfect, and fumigate the city. We are living in a cesspool of filth, utter, degrading, stench-filled filth. It's shameful. It's embarrassing. That's why I carry my tons of disinfectants and my paraphernalia of bleaches. Thank you.
Thank you. So, colleagues, the item before us is to look at ensuring or finding a way to ensure that some of these local return dollars, if Measure M is approved, will be dedicated to fixing our failed streets. As you heard me say before, our local street network is the most basic element of our regional transportation system and is in dire need of improvement. You've also heard me say that everyone uses streets: cyclists, drivers, bus riders, taxis, and rideshare companies. Even pedestrians use streets when they cross crosswalks. Nearly a third of our streets are so damaged that Nazario and his team has made a strategic decision to halt maintenance, and in order to focus limited resources on the streets that can be saved. And in a recent LA Times published an in-depth story about this, and today we have our Bureau Director, Nazario Salcedo, who's here to explain more about this strategy. We also have David Arano from the CAO's office to give an overview on the funding streams we currently use for street and transportation projects. Now, colleagues, this is a discussion item before you. No action will be taken. Mr. Bonin, Chairman of the Transportation Committee, has requested a comprehensive report from the CLA and CAO, which is not complete, and I appreciate Mr. Bonin's leadership on this. Mr. Bonin has asked for consideration of looking at including the Mobility 2035 plan, Vision Zero initiative, safe routes to schools, DOT strategic plan, monthly open street events, first last mile investments, transient stop capital improvements, expansion of bike and car share programs, just to name a few. This is important to note that we cannot implement these types of programs and strategies unless we have streets that are fixed. I do want to bring Mr. Nazario to the table. I proposed a 2/3 of local return to be dedicated to reconstructing our D and F condition streets to start the conversation, but the exact ratio is less important than the objective rather, and that's saving our streets. In fact, Dennis Gleason, my policy director, just shared with me a Metro advertising on bus stops. It says, "Let's fix local streets. Metro's plan means a smoother ride for you." So we appreciate that commitment. As you all know, I was vocal when the first plan came out. I felt that the local return was not fair, and I felt that we needed a larger percentage of local return, and it's because of the leadership of our mayor and our colleagues, Mr. Bonin and Mr. Krikorian and others on the Metro board, that moved that needle. We will, if approved, Measure M, we will be seeing higher local return to ensure that we fix our failing streets. So, Mr. Nazario, I know this is an important issue for you. I appreciate your leadership on this. And I believe if we can just start with, give us a little background overview of the city's strategy for overall street maintenance, including why we focus so much on slurry seal. You've done this before, but now we have a couple new members on the committee. How resurfacing differs from reconstruction, and why we don't reconstruct more streets, or rather, why don't we reconstruct more than just a few items annually, a few miles annually?
Well, good afternoon, and good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and honorable members of the Public Works Committee. I am Nazario Sauceda, Director of the Bureau of Street Services, and with me I have recently appointed Assistant Director Keith Mosey. So I want to thank you, Councilmember Buscaino, for giving me the opportunity to give you a brief update on the status of the street network here in LA. Let me give you a quick description of the street network. Not everyone knows that the city of Los Angeles has the largest municipal street network in the nation and arguably in the world. How big is it? Well, we have 6,500 center line miles of streets. If you were to measure every lane, we have 28,000 lane miles of streets. Now, 28,000, Nazario, doesn't tell me too much. So 28,000 lane miles, how big is that? Well, just so you get an idea, the circumference of planet Earth, our planet, at the equator is 25,000 miles. So with our street system, we can go around planet Earth 1.2 times. That's how big our street system is. Now, the system was not always this big. LA was kind of like small at the beginning of the 1900s. But then in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, the city grew in exponential proportions right after the Second World War. We went from having 3,000 center line miles to 6,500 center line miles of streets. But our predecessors at that time didn't realize that these new streets needed the proper maintenance, right? So even when the city grew to 6,500 center line miles of streets, we were only maintaining 50 miles per year. So when you do the simple math, 6,500 divided by 50, we were paving streets every 100 years. And that's how we allowed the street system, we as a city, we allowed the street system to deteriorate with very little maintenance or no maintenance at all. So now, moving forward to where we are today, in 1998, the Bureau of Street Services decided to adopt Micropaver, a state-of-the-art pavement management system. Through Micropaver, the Bureau was capable of determining the pavement condition index of each one of the 68,000 city blocks that we have in LA. We are the city with the largest number of blocks in the United States. So with that, we were able to determine the pavement condition of each single block in LA. And you are right, Councilmember Buscaino. Right now we have 30% of our network in poor condition, while 70% is in fair to excellent condition. Now, the question is, how come we don't address, the poor streets? And I understand vividly how residents feel sometimes when we maintain streets that are in A, B, and C condition, and we do very little for D's and F's. I think it's understandable to figure out, to think, let's do the worst first. Well, if we were to do the worst streets first, we would be doing the same mistakes that our predecessors made. We cannot allow ourselves to allow the A, B's, and C's to deteriorate. We have done tremendous things in the last 10 years. In 2005, for example, after decades of constant decrease on the average PCI of the network, in 2005, we received finally enough funding to maintain the average PCI of the network steady for the next 8 years, right? But in 2013, with your enthusiastic leadership and support to our pavement preservation program, we received the highest number of dollars in terms of allocation for pavement preservation. And in the last 3 years, we have completed the largest number of pavement preservation miles in the history of this city.
Can you repeat that once? I'm just kidding. That's a big lift.
Right from the beginning?
That was a big lift. That piece right there is a big lift. So
Yes.
again,
Since 2013,
it's that funding commitment led,
Yes.
led by this
since
council, along with the mayor,
2013, the city has seen the largest pavement preservation allocation in the history of this city. And now
And
we
the amount
are
of miles Mr. Price was asking?
Say
Lane
that again?
miles? The amount
Yeah,
of lane
and
miles.
we are completing an average of 2,400 lane miles of pavement preservation. We never completed so many in the history of this city. And this is a great accomplishment. And annual amount, 2,400 lane miles, the equivalent to the distance between LA and Detroit. That's what we complete every single year. Now, that gave us the opportunity not only to maintain the average PCI of the network, but to increase it a little. In 2015, as part of our State of the Streets report, we reported that the average PCI of the network was 62. Now I can tell you that the average PCI of the network is 65, almost 66. So for the first time in decades, the city of Los Angeles is seeing the streets getting better. And I'm quoting the LA Times, second paragraph of Ben Poston's article, recent article. The streets in LA are getting better, right? Now, this progress, however, is very small because, as you mentioned, Councilmember Buscaino, we are dedicating very little of our funding to address the Ds and Fs. We have simulated in micropaver what would happen if we were to put our money on Ds and Fs. And at the end of the day, our street network will deteriorate rapidly if we did something like that. So what is the solution? The solution is to maintain the same level of funding that we have right now to complete 2,400 lane miles of streets to ensure that the A, Bs, and Cs are properly maintained.
And don't fall into D
And don't
Fs,
fall
okay.
into the next category,
Right.
below them, right? And identifying sources of funding to properly address the Ds and Fs. And that's where we are at this point.
So we continue to, because of the current state, and I'll have Dave Hirano pitch in on this, that we continue to, we fail to address the DNS streets because, I'm assuming, of improper funding. Or we don't have the actually adequate
At this
dollars.
point, our level of funding allows the city to sustain the network in the current condition and increase it very slowly year after year. But this increment is very slow, the pace is very slow.
Mr. Mose, you want to add anything before I bring up Mr. Hirano? Sure. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Mose, sorry.
Is it on? Oh, okay. Thank you, Council Member. Similar to painting your house or wood deck, slurry seal preserves streets from water penetration. And streets are slurry sealed to repair minor surface defects in the roadway, restoring the roadway to to give it skid resistance properties, and then cover minor defects. Now, as Nazario mentioned, using this technique, we are able to prevent water penetration into the asphalt or base materials, which is a bad thing. Because when you allow water into the base materials, what happens is the base materials become saturated and are no longer able to hold traffic loads on them, causing streets to fail. So what we want to do with slurry seal applications is encapsulate the roadway, and this preserves the roadway, which is a good thing. Water created the Grand Canyon, so you can imagine how much erosion over time, basically the damage that it causes over time. And so, as mentioned, this saves us dollars now and will save us dollars in the future. As we do these slurry grids, we're able to basically come in at a later date, and it's actually cheaper for us to resurface the roadway because now we do not have to reconstruct the roadway. We just have to do minor maintenance at that time. So that's what slurry seal does, and using this technique, we're able to basically preserve the network over time, and it allows us to get to more streets, preventing that degradation on the roadways.
Thank you, Mr. Mose. I appreciate the input, the insight. If I can call up David Hirano from the CAO's office, talk about the funding streams. So if you can give us an overview of what our existing funding streams are for our streets. In addition, what would it cost us to bring the DNF streets to a state of good repair, and to report on the T committee requested, wondering if when would that report be ready, and give us a rough estimate on how much of the local return the city can expect to receive annually if Measure M is passed.
Okay. I'm David Hirano from the Office of the CAO. The existing pavement preservation program uses just about every fund that we can find that's available to fund it. Gas tax is a primary source for the program. Measure R as well. Proposition C is used, and it's used specifically for roads that carry transit vehicles. In the past, we've used Traffic Safety Fund, although that has kind of dwindled out, and the Street Damage Restoration Fund. We've also used, of course, the General Fund, and the General Fund contribution has been growing in recent years. In terms of your estimated cost of repair for DNF streets, in 2014, the Harris and Associates report estimated that DNF rated streets would cost $3.86 billion to repair, and that was, I think, their high-end estimate. Their low-end estimate was about $3.54 billion, but that was assuming that a construction program would repair that over a 15-year period. At that time, we're also talking about the Save Our Streets program, which would take a 15-year construction program and extend it a few years because we had to ramp up, get everything in place, and then we also had to close down the program, and so it was about a 20-year program in total with 15 years of actual construction. Obviously, if you change any of those variables, the price would change. If you choose to do it over a longer period of time, I suspect the price would go up. If you choose to do it over a shorter period of time, I don't know what will happen to it. It's the complexity in the city would definitely go up. But what I can tell you is very likely the price is north of $3.86 billion at this point, because if you were to start the program in February of 2017, which is only a few months away, that'd be 3 years removed from your estimate. So there would very likely be some level of escalation that you have to factor into it. In terms of the report that was requested by Transportation Committee, we are currently working with our partners in the CLA's office. Our discussions last week, we are estimating that it'll take another month to complete the report back. So we would guess that we'd be done and ready to submit the report at the end of October. In terms of the rough amount of money that we're going to get from Measure M, We've gone over those numbers with Metro, with CLA, with the Mayor's Office, and our current estimate is somewhere in the neighborhood of $55 to $56 million a year in local return. It would have been a lot less than that had you not pushed for a little higher local return. But with 2/3 of that potentially designated for the repair of DNF streets, that would be about $37 million that you would have set aside on an annual basis. To give you a sense of scope in terms of what we were proposing in 2014, that's 16-17% of what we were proposing back then. So while it will be much simpler and probably much easier to implement, our ability to make progress is going to be much diminished from what it would have been under the 2014 proposal. But I think we will definitely make some progress and have a positive impact on the PCI.
Sure. And I know Ms. Norton, one of our speakers, mentioned the Save Our Streets LA initiative that Mr. Engler and I pushed, and I believe even today learned a lot and created more efficiencies. And you know, the pulse of the voter here in the city of Los Angeles felt that we need to do more to create more efficiencies, and I believe we've done that even with Asphalt Plant 1 and other measures that we have already implemented. Do you believe that it's feasible to bring our streets into a state of good repair without new revenue?
Well, it's a matter of priority. So if you deem it the highest priority in the city, then yes. But if you don't, if things like police service and fire service are of a higher priority, then it's going to be a very, very hard struggle. As, you know, the commitment that we're making to homeless services and other things, it would be a very difficult struggle without any new revenue.
Thank you so much for the report. I'll turn it over to my colleagues. I want to say a few words. Ms. Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got budget after this, so I have to leave early. Where do we come up with 2/3 allocation? Where does that come from?
I believe it comes from the motion that the chair submitted.
Yeah, so we felt that...
Walk me through the math. How did that come up? How did you come up with 2/3?
If you look at the proposed or projected return, that we can really maximize those dollars on the DNF streets if and when this measure gets approved.
Okay. Does the Bureau have a sense of how additional funds for Measure M could be utilized by the city?
I'm sorry, was that question directed at myself or at the Bureau?
At the Bureau.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I have a cold.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, by all means. I mean, if we get additional sources of funding, certainly we can utilize them to address the Ds and Fs because we have enough sources of funding for the A, Bs, and Cs. However, we would have to require additional staff to perform the specialized work that is involved in addressing the Ds and Fs. But by all means, if we can get the additional sources of funding, we have already identified the streets that require reconstruction. We have a plan. We can put together a plan based on 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. I mean, there's a strategy in place that we put together back in 2014 when the Harris report was put together. So certainly we would have to revise it, but the Bureau is capable of doing that work if that source of funding is made available.
And what other types of priorities should we be considering?
Well, I think at this point, if this became a reality, I think we need to take a more holistic approach and overlay these DNF work with perhaps with our current sidewalk efforts, with the tree sustainability plan, so we can provide neighborhoods with a more comprehensive plan, right? Not only a resurfacing or reconstruction plan, but a more comprehensive approach to make our neighborhoods more livable, more walkable, you know, create a more sustainable opportunities for resurfacing. So there are a lot of technologies right now that we could be implementing.
My only concern is I don't want to lose the opportunity or the ability to deal with other transportation needs like crosswalks, traffic signals, bike lanes. That's my concern, and why I was asking about the 2/3. If we were to proceed with the 2/3, is there a way to steal a portion of money for each council district? Do you see that opportunity, or is that even possible?
I don't seem to fully understand your question,
So we
Councilwoman.
move forward with the two-thirds
Right.
as proposed by the author. Do you foresee us being able to divvy up the money equally among 15 council districts?
Well, I mean, we would use a formula, a budget allocation formula, because not everyone has the same number of miles of Ds and Fs. We would come up with a formula. We would report back to this committee with a proposed formula to allocate the funding. Now I understand your question. Yes, by all means, we would have to come to you based on the number of miles, the area, and the pavement conditions. We would come up with a formula for your consideration.
And I assume you already have this, but based on all the data that you have, you already know where the Ds and Fs are?
That is correct.
Okay.
We have every single block in LA with the different PCI
And off
numbers.
the top of your head, where are the concentration of Ds and F streets? What
They are-
communities?
They are everywhere. They are everywhere. I cannot tell you one council district has more than the other one. They are everywhere. If you go to our interactive map, which is on our website, and you just zoom out, you'll see red, meaning streets in poor condition, in every corner of the city.
But some districts might be worse than others. I'm sure there is.
Well, I would have to come back with a report to let you know which
And
one.
my last question, Mr. Chair, what's the status of the Transportation Committee report? Because I know we heard this item in T Committee.
Councilmember, the report is expected to be complete and returned to committee by the end of October.
Okay.
We're actually shooting for a little bit before that, but
Great.
end of October to be safe.
All right, thank you.
Can I also answer one of your other questions? I think you kind of hit on an important point from my perspective. If we go down this path and we dedicate this money to repair failed streets, it'll be critical that we also make a commitment to maintain the street program that we have. The pavement preservation program that Mr. Sauceda is already running needs to be continue to be funded at its full complement in order for us to continue to make progress. And I think you also hit on an important point. There will be a need to coordinate with sidewalks and with repair and with the stormwater repair program that we're looking at. And there's also a significant number of streets that come into the capital improvement program every year that are critical emergencies, where they're falling down hillsides or they've got sinkholes in the middle of them, things that need to get repaired right away. So we're going to have to take a multi-pronged approach to this, and the repair of the Ds and Fs is great. It needs to be one prong, though, and we need to maintain our discipline and our focus on the remaining sets of streets
And
as
sir,
well.
that was my point, is I want to make sure there's going to be money for the sidewalk and the crosswalk and the traffic signal and everything else that comes, that it takes to actually complete a street. That was my point.
Well, so under the current structure for Measure M and with the chair's motion, as I understand it, about 37 million would be dedicated to the repair of D and F streets, but there still would be approximately 18 to 19 million that could be programmed as well for other uses that City Council deems important, some of which you've stated. So.
Thank you. I know you have budget to head to. Thanks, Ms. Martinez. Mr. Price, Mr. Rue, and I think everyone wants to chime in on this. Mr. Price, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the report, gentlemen. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for your leadership, especially in calling for the local for these local monies to come back. I had similar concerns that the councilwoman raised. It's counterintuitive, but I guess it does make sense to continue fixing the A, B's, and C's. My question is, what happens to the D's and F's? They're certainly going to require some reconstruction, correct? I mean, they by definition, they need to be reconstructed. And at what point? I mean, it seems like at some point they've got to be repaired. How do you keep putting it off? And then just added to that, how many times can a street be slurry sealed? I mean, I understand the preventive function of that, but is that 2, 3 times, or 4 times, or 10 times, or how does that work?
Let me answer the easy one, the last question. A street in good condition can be slurry sealed, up to 3 times, depending on the climate, on the weather of the city. The Asphalt Institute recommends no more than 3. But here in LA, since we have such a mild weather, it's acceptable to do up to 4. Now, streets are slurry sealed every 5 to 7 years. That's the durability that we get from slurry. So if you pave a street today in 2016, the first application of slurry can happen within the next 5 years, 2021. Then if you apply slurry again in 2026, and then you can apply again slurry on 2030, I'm going to say, right? So you are extending the life of the street for at least 21 more years. So that's the reason why slurry is so critical. Now, in terms of reconstruction, right now our current efforts, the money that we get, every year to perform pavement preservation is primarily allocated for A, Bs, and Cs. Nevertheless, when we go to a neighborhood, and let's assume that we are resurfacing 3 or 4 streets in a grid, and there's a street that requires reconstruction, we perform reconstruction of that street because it's only more efficient for us to do it while we're there. We don't want to come back later to do just one street, right? So those are the special occasions when we address reconstruction. Other than that, we don't go to neighborhoods to do reconstruction, one street here and one street there, because number one, it is very, very expensive. For every street, for every block that I reconstruct, I can resurface 5 or 6. So it is a strategy that is counterproductive if we don't do it the right way. I know that our methodology is not popular. I know that residents don't seem to fully understand why we do things. But believe me, there's engineering behind it. There's best management practices. And this methodology gave the Bureau of Street Services last year the award from the National Foundation for Pavement Preservation, the award for excellence in pavement preservation. The Bureau of Street Services, the City of LA received the national award for pavement preservation issued or presented by the National Foundation for Pavement Preservation.
Yeah, well, notwithstanding that award, if you're living on a street that's jacked up, and the sidewalks are crazy and potholes are continuously refilled, and we appreciate the expedited service that we got in our district last week, in a particular street. But how do we try to create some equity and try to make certain that some of the worst ones are getting done along the way? Are we going to have to rely on this additional funding source to make that happen? Otherwise, we were just kind of out of luck.
Well, at this point, it is extremely critical to identify additional sources of revenue. Because if we were to borrow money or take money from the A, Bs, and Cs, it will only result in a detrimental strategy. We have to be extremely careful about not making the mistakes that our predecessors made. And I'm not saying that, they made mistakes because they were bad people. Perhaps they didn't have the information that we have today, micropaver, the technologies available today. So at this point, I think the strategy that you as a committee are proposing here with this motion is an excellent strategy, identifying additional resources to fully dedicate these resources to the Ds and Fs without taking away anything from the A, Bs, and Cs.
And Mr. Chair, I apologize for being a little late, and this may have gone over before, but you indicated the source of funding, current source of funding for our street repair program, gas tax, Measure R, Measure C, general fund. How much does all that add up to? On an annual basis, how much are we spending?
For the fiscal year 2016-2017, we've budgeted a pavement preservation program across 4 departments that have to cooperate to make this work of $149 million.
And it's been that way for the past several years, or this is at
Yeah,
an all-time high now,
back,
or what?
Yeah, if you look at it back over the last 5 years, it's ranged anywhere from 132 million, 150 million, somewhere in that area. I think we've been very fortunate because the Bureau of Street Services has worked with DOT, the Mayor's Office, Engineering, and General Services, and they've found ways to create efficiencies. So the price tag has not grown from, out of sight. But I expect in the near future you would see that number hover in that area.
Well, this local return is really a windfall. I mean, it's kind of a gift to be used. And, all right, Thank you.
And to piggyback on Mr. Price's line of questioning, I'll turn over Mr. Rue and then Mr. O'Farrell. What would, Dave, what would be our bonding capacity if Measure M was to pass? In looking at allocation of $37 million a year in perpetuity, right?
Correct. Well, and that would go up or down depending upon how the local economy goes.
Right.
But I think, you're asking me a question, and if I give you an answer, a lot can change. There are a lot of variables that go into it. But I think the best answer is if you look at if you go back to the Save Our Streets LA report, we estimated what it would take, what we could get in terms of net proceeds from $37 million, I think at the time, in Prop C funds, which are also sales tax, countywide sales tax, and that was $470 million. But that would be a lump sum, $470 million. You have to spend all $37 million paying debt service back. So you'd just spend $47 million and you'd be done for a long time. So I'm not sure that that's a strategy that we would recommend. In fact, I think when we were looking at SOS LA, between our office and the chief legislative analyst, we decided that a cash basis was a much better way to approach things. But if there's a single year or a single project that we want to expedite, that may be a better way to think about using debt as opposed to just issuing debt all up front and then having to sit back and do nothing for several years while we pay the debt off.
Understood. Thank you. Mr. Rue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Councilman Price, you're absolutely correct. This could be a major windfall, but this is only if we decide to go through with this motion and make sure that we use local return for the streets. And thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership on this matter. I was more than happy to second your motion on this. I think this is one of the most critical things that we could do in the city of LA, infrastructure. And while I currently disagree with the current strategy of how we do streets, but I understand it's a formula that's been worked in a long time, and I would have loved to seen a more mixed formula. But I think this is an opportunity here because it's difficult for us because we're always trying to make the dollar stretch. There's so many problems in infrastructure, from water mains to street lighting to sidewalks to trees. There's so many things that need to be funded, so that when we have an opportunity like this, assuming Measure M passes, that we have this opportunity to fund. So I fully concur with your motion on this, and I hope this happens. And I have a couple of quick questions. So you were saying after 4 slurry seals. What happens after 4 slurry seals? Does that street need to be redone? Or?
At that time, the street probably qualifies now for resurfacing. Okay. However, if we don't apply the slurry, you will require resurfacing before, 21 years. When you say when I say 3 or 4 application of slurry, I'm thinking resurfacing won't happen again in the next 20 to 25 years. But if you don't apply slurry, resurfacing will be needed within 15 years or so. So that's the key thing. That's the important thing about investing pennies to save dollars when we do a slurry application.
Okay, great. And, I look forward to the full report coming back. I really hope we could pass this motion and get our other council members to agree, because this is one of the most fundamental things that we could do. Even if it's not at 2/3, any amount. This is sorely needed. It's a public safety issue. It's and I wanted to follow up on one of the questions that Councilmember Price also asked, and I wanted to see if I could make the report is due in about 60 days?
End of October.
End of October. So if it's possible, if it's with the chair's approval, and if the CAO could do it, I'd like to include in the committee's instruction on the report back on the number of claims and the value, the dollar figure of claims against the city and the settlements related to poor street condition in the last 3 years. So that would be an interesting figure, to look at. And I guess in that same vein, considerations of impact to damage to personal vehicles and traffic that it has on commerce in the city of LA. So that's a little bit more broader, amorphous question, but the actual settlements that we pay out in, would be a great number to have a perspective on. And that's it for me.
I appreciate that.
Council member, just a point of clarification. The report that we're working on is a report back to Transportation Committee and was requested specifically by Transportation Committee. So that will go back that route. I don't know how your request fits into that report. We could certainly talk to the chair of Transportation Committee if he feels that's a friendly. I guess we can do that, or unless you're specifically requesting to report back on that item from here. I'm not sure how that works out. Yeah. I'm more than happy to provide information. I just don't know how.
Well, I'm on Transportation Committee as well, so I...
You know some people there.
Oh, you know somebody there. Okay,
Well,
good.
Yeah, I didn't realize. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay.
So when it comes back to committee.
Yeah, so...
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Mr. O'Farrell? So just some questions and some thoughts here. So in your report on the Ds and Fs, that includes all alleyways too, yes?
This is only for streets.
Only streets? Have you done an assessment on the condition of alleyways as well?
There is no recent assessment of alleys. We know for using just empirical information that out of the 800 miles of alleys that we have in LA, 50% are improved, meaning that they were designed and built using engineering practices, and 50% are not. Right. So those that were not, designed properly have right now a lot of drainage issues.
So that could be, that's another little consideration for local
another
return.
consideration, yeah, that is not included on this proposal.
And Mr. Hirono, you mentioned the combined monies before with Prop A, Prop C, the different pots that add up. Did that also include Measure R?
Yes.
Okay, and what's the total combined of say it again if you wouldn't mind. I think you said $149
million.
So we're getting that annually now for the purpose of streets and sidewalks?
For the A, Bs, and Cs, as Mr. Saceda has described.
Okay, but not Ds and Fs?
Correct.
Okay, and that doesn't include alleys?
Other than what he can work into the program, like he described.
And so then, as you said, 2/3 of 56 million is 37 million. And according to my calculations, it would take about 100 years, if you were to use all of that, to rebuild all of our Ds and Fs.
Well, that's assuming that the cost doesn't escalate between now and then.
And that's if that is solely for that purpose.
Correct.
And I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just, to underscore the gravity of the situation we're in.
Councilmember, your math is right, without accounting for escalation and without accounting for the lifespan of a typical street as well.
So
our streets will not survive 100 years, so there may be others that get added to the program as we go. So
we're going to have to get very inventive,
well,
no matter what we do.
That was why the SOS proposal had a construction period of 15 years, which would have been extremely challenging for Public Works, but I have no doubt they could have done it. But the money just isn't there to do that. But we do need to make some progress. And this is only the first step in my mind.
So just to throw some other factors into the mix, what funding sources, if any, are currently being used for dash lines?
Primarily Proposition A.
Prop A, and about how much? We haven't
don't
created
have
any
that
new
off the
dash
top of
lines
my head.
in forever. It's DOT. They might have that answer. I don't know if they're here or not, but.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head.
But is that a pretty small amount allocated for dash?
No, but I think the amount of money that we're using for dash and commuter express and City Ride, that's significant.
Significant.
The Prop A fund gets about $70 million in annual revenue. So.
Okay. So that's a conversation to have with DOT in terms of dash, and we're having those conversations. Now, to throw other priorities into the mix, you've got public staircases, you have private walkways, we've got streetscapes. Just to throw in other priorities, and then you talk about, in terms of the goals from Mobility 2035, recommends 20% for walking, biking, other safe routes, other modes of travel, and that you're starting to, if you go beyond 2/3 and you add another 20%, you're talking 86%, and you're talking upwards of limited pots of money. So the considerations will have to be made.
to involve all of that. And I would just put out there, since this is just a discussion anyway, that, I mean, I'm really big on walkability. I'm really big on streetscapes and the thoughtful installation of bike lanes and those conversations. And I just want to put out there for dialogue before we settle on, a hard and fast set-aside percentage of these monies, that we have a robust conversation about those other priorities. And really, I know in my district I have a lot of public staircases. A lot of those are in disrepair. And so I'd like that to be a consideration as well. And as I mentioned before, streetscape improvements, that if there could be funds, some sort of allocation for streetscape improvements as well, because we know what those do for communities in terms of making the walking pedestrian experience safer and more inviting. And then lastly, I think, yeah, that pretty much covers it. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And let's.
So, Councilmember,
Yes.
if I could respond to that, with a lot of the pedestrian facilities and things, there are other types of sources of money that are available. We do have a small pot every year in Measure R that we set aside for pedestrian facilities and for pedestrian programs. There's also a small pot there for bicycle programs, and then there's also the local transportation fund, which is also a state sales tax fund, where we get an allocation every year specifically for construction of pedestrian and bicycle facilities. And we have a significant amount of money in that fund as of today. I know DOT is looking at that and trying to program a lot of capital projects in there, but there are other ways to fund some of those as well. So they're not necessarily in direct competition with this. Well, there could be. It just depends how much you want to do.
I would say for the sake, thank you for offering that, Mr. Hirano. I'd say for the sake of providing a full context of this discussion, should Measure R pass, M pass, then it would be great to have a clear understanding, even if it's in a chart of some type, so that we know what we're looking at in terms of apples to oranges or apples to apples comparison.
Thank you, Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you
for your insight and suggestions. Really appreciate the presentation. Again, a discussion item before us. I think our main goal is to identify other revenue streams, and I believe if Measure M is passed, working alongside my colleagues here and the mayor, we'll be able to, if approved by this body, this council, be able to dedicate that revenue stream that we've been missing for decades. So with that, I do want to recognize, looks like a baseball team from somewhere in the city of Los Angeles. Encino Little League All-Stars. Give them a round of applause. Welcome to the Public Works and Gang Reduction Committee meeting. Really appreciate your presence. Do you want to speak on streets, anyone? Okay, seeing none. Yeah. So to our team players, we're going to introduce you our First Amendment right and a public speaker, Antonio Ramirez. This is a general public comment. This will, after she's done, we will conclude our committee meeting. Thank you so much for joining the John Ferraro Chambers. Good luck to you, and we'll see you at Dodger Stadium one day.
Thank you.
Ms. Ramirez.
Thank you. If you remember, the Latino ex-city attorney, Rocky Delgadillo, a Harvard Law School graduate, he helped usher about 30,000 to 80,000 military veterans and families into poverty and homelessness. However, he helped pack the city hall with Chango, gangbangers, and wetback employees. And today, we are paying the price. We have a wetback and Latino gang epidemic. Yes, Los Angeles is under siege, thanks to the dishonorable and unethical Mayor Eric Garcetti and his co-accomplice and political panderer city attorney Mike Fuhr, along with their wicked and corrupted reptilian lizards, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the Homeland Security, and the Secret Service, who have financially sponsored and subsidized all these ugly Latino chango wetback gangbanging domestic terrorists and enemy combatants who are pussies, pigs, and thieves. And that is why I'm voting for Donald Trump, because he does talk the talk and walk the walk. Can you say the same, Eric Garcetti and Mike Fior? God bless Donald Trump.
Okay, colleagues, thank you so much. This now concludes our Public Works and Gang Reduction Committee. Thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you for your presentation. And let's serve our city. Thank you.